just need to start, that's all. Okay, good evening, everyone. Yep, I got the thumbs up, so we're good, same time. Just need to start that, so. Did I hear someone say something? Am I hearing voices? Okay. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Bloomington, City of Bloomington Committee of the Whole. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Walsh.
Here.
Councilmember Bolin.
Here.
Councilmember Motney.
Here.
Councilmember Ime.
Present.
Councilmember Becker.
Here.
Councilmember Urban.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Yes.
Councilmember Craybill.
Here.
Councilmember Crumpler is absent. Mayor Millamboy.
Here. Do we have any public comment, Madam Clerk?
We do not.
Oh, wow. Okay. I guess we're gonna move on then. We're gonna move to the next item on the agenda, which is the mayor's annual address. This is not gonna be quite as fancy as the State of the Union, but just a chance for me to share a few thoughts on and reflect on what's happened this past year. I wanted therefore to kick off this committee of the whole meeting by taking some time to reflect on all the City of Bloomington has achieved last year. From enhancing our infrastructure to providing better public services, the City of Bloomington has so much to be proud of. 2022 was a year of growth, innovation, community engagement that led to some truly remarkable accomplishments. Facilities crews completed structural and safety improvements to the Market Street and Abraham Lincoln parking garages, as well as some much needed drainage improvements for the Lincoln garage. 2022 saw streets and sewer crews, solid waste teams, and workers from parks and recreation band together for snow and ice removal, including 2 record-breaking snow events in February that required several consecutive days of salting and plowing. Street crews worked throughout the year, performing long line patching in several subdivisions, extending the life of the existing pavement. They also attended to the more than 1,300 potholes that were reported. Street resurfacing and preservation work, along with bringing sidewalks into ADA compliance, kept crews on the move in 2022, with $10.8 million being invested in repairs to our roads, sidewalks, and sewers last year alone. Expansion could be thought of as the word of the year in Bloomington, as we broke ground on a new $1.2 million South American exhibit and opened a new Sullivan Rorschach Educational Theater at Miller Park Zoo. The zoo also celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Junior Zookeeper program and welcomed a new management team that brought fresh ideas and new perspectives to this staple of our community. With the goal of promoting and supporting the arts in Bloomington, the city moved forward with creating an arts and entertainment standalone division, bringing Grosinger Motors Arena and the Bloomington Center for the Performing Arts under one supervisory umbrella. As we continue to build on that foundation, we are also focused on building a strong workforce in our community. Through partnerships with the EDC and the McLean County Chamber of Commerce, we are all working to attract talented individuals to our community. With all we have to offer, drawing the best and brightest to Bloomington is on the horizon. The best and the brightest also applies to the much anticipated O'Neill Park and Pool. This $13.8 million project is on track to open by Memorial Day and will provide residents with access to the free spray park, a new aquatic facility that will include a lap pool, the main pool with a lazy river, a water slide, and the new skate park will open. It is a welcome addition to the west side of our community. In 2022, we also broke ground for the expansion and renovation of the Bloomington Public Library. Almost 2 decades after the original idea to expand was introduced, the $25 million makeover is now a reality. Progress is underway and patrons will enjoy additional study rooms, a computer lab, 2 recording studios, and an incredible innovation lab when it's all said and done. All the projects the city takes on provide a new sense of community and increase opportunities for residents to be physically active, healthy, and even well-read. Embarking on a new design plan for a new streetscape project in downtown Bloomington is an exciting opportunity to improve the public spaces and enhance the quality of life for residents and visitors. This planning process involves input from the community, local businesses, and government stakeholders, and ensures that the final design meets the needs and aspirations of the city. Effective design considerations such as accessibility, green infrastructure, and aesthetic appeal will be important in creating an exciting new look for the business district. I want to commend the city's economic and community development team on their successful efforts to attract new businesses and support current establishments, resulting in a strong and vibrant community. In June, Ferrero announced a second project for its Bloomington plant, a $214 million expansion of the Kinder Bueno line that will also add 250 jobs and mark the first time Kinder products will be made in North America. The transformation of the former C2 East building into 102 Southeast LLC got underway with an expected project cost of $4 million. These are just 2 of the major developments happening in our city. On the housing front, the city's building division issued more than 7,000 permits in 2022, with a total construction value of more than $164 million. Among those, 130 permits for new single-family units and 3 permits for multifamily buildings totaling 118 units were issued. In 2022, the EDC commissioned a housing study that has led to a great deal of interest from the developer community, and our economic development continues to work tirelessly and creatively to make sure we are able to meet the housing challenges we face as quickly as possible. These things that I've mentioned are just a few highlights of what happened in 2022. There's more to share next month. So for now, I offer my heartfelt gratitude to the city employees, elected officials, boards and commissions, volunteers, and residents for their hard work and dedication in making 2022 such a successful year. Your continued efforts are essential in ensuring a bright and prosperous future for our community. And having recently approved a new strategic plan that sets priorities for our community, I am confident that 2023 will be an even better year for the city of Bloomington. Thank you all. To thunderous applause. Okay, you didn't have to, but thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on to the consent agenda, and on which there is only one item, and I'd like to have a motion to.
I'll make the motion to
okay.
approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Boland, second by Councilmember Crable. Are we doing a link or voice vote?
There's a link available.
Okay, all right, awesome. Okay, the item passes. There are no nays to announce, and we're going to move on to the regular agenda with item 6A, a presentation of the fiscal year 2024 budget capital projects as
Mayor?
requested.
I apologize. We didn't get Councilmember Ward's vote.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh, there it is now. Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
It was a yes.
Okay, all right. So presentation of fiscal year 2024 budget capital projects as requested by the Finance Department, and I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Gleason for introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before I shift to the FY24 conversation that we're going to have this evening, at the last meeting, Alderman Walsh asked a question about staffing related to population, also tied to the city's budget. Shared that information with council, but I promised to communicate to the community on what those numbers were. We could take this down so many different paths, and I could spend 20 or 30 minutes on this, but I had asked at the last meeting to take this back beyond the 2016 fiscal year that Alderman Walsh had commented to, and take it back to 2010. Because I knew that was post-recession. I knew that the city was hit very hard and there was major reductions to staffing. So we know in 2010 up till now in 2020, we've had modest growth to the community with our recent census and modest growth, I'll take it, in the current climate in the state of Illinois. So we are one of the few communities throughout the state that did have growth. What we saw in staffing, in 2010, our staffing numbers were 663. And then last week, when I commented to that major reduction, that actually occurred in 2011 and cut about 70 positions down to 592 for the 2011 fiscal year. And then interestingly, we find that in the current fiscal year that we're in right now, FY23, our numbers are 665. So we had 663 full-time staff in 2010, and in this current fiscal year, we're back at that number at 665. And again, I realize that there's so many different components to this, and you can take this so many different directions regarding a further explanation, which is due. But the one thing that I also would share is what the budget was back in 2010. It was about $140 million. And this year, we are proposing a $290 million all funds budget. So that's over twice, and we are just back at the staffing numbers that we had at 2010. And I would also contend that while there's inflation, there's cost of materials, there's cost of labor that factors into that total fiscal year budget number that I mentioned. I also firmly believe and feel if it's necessary that I could share how staff and the different individual departments are doing more today than what they were in the past. So the constant desire of council to do more with less, I believe that is the case with this organization. I promise that feedback can do more at a later date, but said that I would deliver that prior to this portion. I'm going to shift to the presentation itself. Scott Rathman, his team, the directors that you see in front of us, this is an important step that we're going to discuss. I know council's seen this and heard this information in 3-on-1s, but not just the council members. This is our community discussion as we followed the schedule to adopt an FY24 budget tentatively that first meeting in April. I will ask, just so that we can stay on point, that all questions are held until the end of the presentation. And then Scott, I'll let you, kick this thing off. So there you go.
Thank you, City Manager, Mayor, Council. Last Monday, we introduced FY24 budget in total, $290 million, of which almost $70 million was for capital projects. That's nearly 25% of the total budget. So tonight, I'm excited to have the department heads present the detail of those projects. And so I won't spend a lot of time doing financial introductions related to that, but I would like to introduce who's going to be speaking this evening. We got Eric Veal, Director of Parks and Rec, Russ Waller, Facilities Manager, Craig Schonkweiler, Assistant Public Works Director, and Kevin Cothey, Public Works Director. Next slide, please. This slide we went through last week. So 69.7, I'm rounding up to $70 million total for the year, up nearly $13 million from last year. Now we do have some significant dollars rolling forward from year to year. The majority of the motor fuel tax is a roll forward, but I want to highlight as well with the arena, that rooftop unit, 3.8 million. $5 million for 24. That's a $3.6 million roll forward from FY 23 for those rooftop units. So I wanted to highlight that in totals before we launch into the details. Next slide, please. So without further ado, Mr. Eric Veal, please take away for the Parks and Rec and the golf funds.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rathman. Council, Mayor, City Manager, thanks for the opportunity tonight to share with you what we hope you will consider approving for next year. We have put great thought into these topics. We have heard from the residents, and I will share with you when we touch on some of those. So starting with the first one on the list, unforeseen major repairs through the Parks and Rec Cultural Arts Department. We have found in the previous years that we have heating and air conditioners that go out in multiple facilities due to maintenance needs, and that is our primary role for those. And those are typically $5,000 to $20,000. So that's what that line item is for. The next two line items go together, the Walt Bittner Park Playground and the Fell Park Playground, because we would hopefully apply for a grant similar to what we did this year with the Sweeney Park Playground. The Walt Bittner Playground, though, is our last wooden playground and has a Norway pine that was supposed to last a long time, but is now rotting at the base, so that we need to replace that, and that is a priority. Fell Park is a lovely neighborhood park, and so that is past its useful life. The Lincoln Leisure Center restoration of elements, that is part of the Faithful and Gould study that was in 2014, and we continue to try and catch up on deferred maintenance at the Lincoln Leisure Center. That would be for tuck pointing on the outside of the building. Trail resurfacing, both of the next two items, I want to say that we partner greatly with our Public Works Department on these. They help go out for bid on these so we get the best value that we can. And these are resident requests that come in and tell us where there's the most need. Obviously, we go out and check ourselves, but this is an area that has been requested by the residents. The Route 66 trail is part of the IGA that we have with the county, the town of Normal, and the city of Bloomington. The city is already mainly done with that, and we are still paying our portion for the outside of the community on that one. Park maintenance, since Mose, our assistant director, and I started, we went and started evaluating the needs of some facilities we have. With the city's DEI and ADA initiatives that are happening right now, we felt that it was important that we look at improving the restrooms, especially because we now have more women in the workforce in our parks maintenance area, and also become compliant with ADA. Landscaping and the monument, the next two items, they're different because we would like to finish the landscaping around the monument sign that is already existing over by Eastland Mall. That's a really nice gateway feature when you come into town. The second item there is another monument style sign that we, Parks and Recreation, will be glad to help install if that is approved by you guys. Last round of items for us here is an exciting thing for us, actually, the Highland Park shed and clubhouse replacement. Right now we have a building that is probably 100 years old. It's from the Meyer Brewery, which is what was Highland Park before we acquired it from them. And this building is probably not safe for you to stand on the second floor, so we're not able to use that anymore. In addition, we used to store all the carts in there and now can only get half of them in there because it is not usable in certain areas. So we would like to replace that, turn that into a dual use building with both the clubhouse and the shed in there as well. And then where the current clubhouse is in the small building across the way, we could turn that into an event area for after outings so that we could also maybe generate some more revenue. The next item is actually from residents and golfers, and because the pond dredging hasn't happened recently and it has silted in, what happens then is you get a smell that emanates through the residential area and for the golfers. So that would take care of that. And last but not least, we had a roof on the den that for aesthetics did not have gutters, and we need to replace the roof due to time, but the base around the building has sunken about 4 inches because it doesn't have gutters. So at the same time, we would like to put gutters on to prevent that for the future. So that's my list, and I will now pass it off to the illustrious Mr. Russ Waller.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Council and Mayor, for the opportunity to present the proposed projects the facilities has for upcoming fiscal year 24. The first one we have is for the police department. We're looking to do some improvements to their front desk, their tower area. And that's essentially for security reasons, but also address some ADA issues and potentially add a third window for their ability to serve more customers. Moving on then is for our solar evaluation. And that essentially is what it is. It's an evaluation. We actually won't be constructing anything. We're just going to evaluate multiple city facilities, multiple city locations to see what best fits where we could put some solar in the future. And based on that evaluation, we would follow up in subsequent years with some actual solar installations. Moving on, another evaluation is the EV charging. So we do have some EV charging at the city. We've already starting some evaluation of how much is getting used, and it is getting used quite a bit. This is essentially an additional evaluation beyond just how much usage there is, but also where we can place additional charging. One of the prime locations we're looking at would be the Lincoln Garage. But in addition to just determining a location, you also have to look at the ability for that facility to handle the electrical load and what it would cost to add additional load capacity if necessary. So that evaluation would be a good start in determining where we would add additional additional charging stations in the future. The unforeseen, similar to what Eric had put in his, we often will run into an issue where some project comes up, something comes up that we didn't account for, didn't expect. And so this is an ongoing item we put in our budget for years to just address those issues and handle that. City Hall ADA and life safety. So this is a carryover. So we weren't able to accomplish everything current fiscal year. We do have the elevator under design, and we'll go into construction and be bid for construction here later this year. So that's part of the ADA. The other issues, there's some fire alarm is essentially obsolete, needs to be replaced. Then in addition, there's some additional ADA issues exterior to the building. Some of the sidewalks, some of the driveways need to get replaced. And then there's some potential evaluation, depending on the scope of some of the items we do, for some fire suppression potential that has to be added. And then another item is some mechanical or ventilation issues that need to be addressed with that. So it's a hefty amount, but there's a lot involved in that work. Moving on, then the city building and tuck pointing and sealing. So Eric mentioned they're going to do that in Lincoln Leisure Center. We'll obviously cooperate with them and maybe bid this as a one complete package to maximize some cost efficiencies and hopefully get better pricing. This is primarily work. It's going to be at the police department. We've done some initial evaluation. There is some leakage that it's occurring, and there is some damage to the existing tuck pointing or the mortar joints that need to get addressed. We also are going to have City Hall done at the same time, but there's not much at City Hall. It's primarily at the police department. Moving on down to the parking. So the Abraham Lincoln Garage, we are currently working. We've completed a lot of the work that was included in the current fiscal budget. That will finish here once the weather turns. That'll get wrapped up. So the current budget of $600,000 we're spending will be completed here probably in March to April. So this is a continuation of some of those improvements. There's still a lot of drainage issues we need to address. So with the drainage, we kind of started the current projects from the ground up, replacing all of the drainage pipings in there to address the lower levels of the drainage. And then the next project will basically take it clear to the roof. And we also started from a ceiling point from the top down. So we've sealed the roof to avoid any kind of leakage and drippage that come through from the top level to get to the lower levels. And so we're going to basically finish the center portions of the garage. In addition to the drainage, there's also some minor structural work that'll continue with this project. It's still a hefty amount, but there is a lot of work yet to be done in that garage, and we want to make sure we take care of it so we don't get into a situation like we are at the Market Garage. And with that said, I was asked to kind of get an update on Market Garage. So that work is currently in place or in progress. They have not completed it. They are actually working through the winter. That's not common, but we've asked them to continue to work, and they've agreed to work and do the work through the winter. They're putting in temporary heating where it's appropriate to make sure the concrete cures correctly, just to be able to keep that work going and get it done. They are anticipating to get all of that current structural repairs done in March, possibly April, if they get into some weather issues, but the weather's been very cooperative for them. So when that work is complete, that will extend the life of that garage about 2 to 3, maybe even 4 years, which gives us that time to continue with the evaluation of what replacement would be there, whether if it's Connect Transit or if it's something else. Moving on then to last one on our list is the arena RTU replacement, a very high dollar item, obviously, but this is essentially a need to keep that facility operational. The current rooftop units are used R22 refrigerant, which is no longer available. And the units are severely deteriorated. And so we're doing the best we can to maintain them, keep them operational. They do currently function. So there's not a like immediate need, but if we don't plan and we don't get the design done, which is currently in progress, but if we don't move forward with this, then we're going to run into an emergency situation, which we don't want. So this is a project that we can move slowly forward, but it does need to move forward to be able to make sure we keep the facility operational. Without the rooftop units, there would be no heating or cooling in the facility. Essentially, it'd be unoccupied or unusable at that. With that, I'll turn it over to Craig.
Thank you, Russ. Next slide. First item on the list there is the land acquisition for the Citizens Convenience Center, about 350,000. There's also a companion piece later on that Kevin will present with 150,000 for construction. The reason the Citizens Convenience Center needs to be relocated is it's for the site, the current site of the proposed East Street Basin. So we need to relocate that to another yet to be determined location within the city. The next item is the extension of the Constitution Trail from its current terminus near Evergreen Cemetery. There on Lincoln, take it another full block south past the metal recycler. The next two items, the Constitution Trail extension from Lafayette to Hamilton. This would be the design component, the final design component for that piece of the trail. We're currently wrapping up the phase 1 study, expecting approval from the Department of Transportation here within the next month or two. This is the companion piece to that. And this is all about positioning us for a 80-20 ITEP grant in the summer of 25. The Meadowbrook Subdivision Improvement Project, this is the infrastructure piece, or in essence, the surface piece of this. Later, there will be a companion piece that Kevin will talk about with the water. It's a water-driven project that will impact the streets and the sidewalks. This 1.75 would be the street restoration, the curbs, the curb ramps, things like that. The last item is Airport Road and Cornelius Drive traffic signal improvements. This would be combined with design and construction to install new signals at Airport and Cornelius, which is near Central High School. That location currently meets signal warrants. There is also a $600,000 DCO grant that we would apply towards this project. So the net cost to the city is expected to be $1,000 or $100,000. Next slide, please. This page shows our motor fuel tax fund. We have the two bit large projects, the Fox Creek and the Hamilton Road. This is the continuation of that. Our status on that Fox Creek, where we have some land acquisition that we need to do, finish out the design, utilities to relocate, and our goal is to get that out to bid here this year and start construction. That would be a multi-year project, looking at about 2 years. Jumping down Hamilton Road, we're a little bit farther along on land act there. And we have some utilities to relocate, and then we have the railroad track siding that we need to move out of the way so we can get an at-grade crossing there. Back up in the middle there, we have streetlight charges. This is our annual 500,000 part that comes out of motor fuel tax for the electricity and maintenance of our streetlights within the city. And then at the very bottom here is the Illinois Route 9 corridor improvements. The DOT has plans to improve Route 9 from Martin Luther King on the west side of the city to the east side near the Sierra, the airport. This 500,000 is a set aside at this time. So for the city share of the first portion from Martin Luther King up to Henshaw, we do think it's fairly conservative. We haven't got the final numbers here. But as we move along, the city would contribute a city share. I might add that that city share is fairly small relative to the total cost of the whole improvement. Next slide, please. This slide is basically our asphalt or resurfacing sidewalk and emergency street and alley and sidewalk repairs funds. This year, we do have a companion piece of ARPA money of about 2 million allocated to this for a total of $10 million. The remaining 8 million come from the general fund. I'll turn it over to Kevin Kofi.
Kevin, if you would, hold on just a minute. Catherine or Phil, go back to slide 5, please. Just an additional comment for the community's sake. You'll see that first one on the convenience center land acquisition. I know council's aware of this, but I'm saying this for the community's sake. Convenience center is something that is highly used. It's a highly desirable amenity that we have at the city that we offer. What's going on here is as a result or one of the outcomes of the June 2021 flooding, council directed us not only to combine and shorten the Locust Colton project overall, but there was another component to this where we were asked or directed to look at hydraulic modeling. You know, where does the stormwater go in a storm event? You know, like we saw in June of 2021. One of the locations that we found that there is going to be a detention basin. While that study is not complete, we are confident that one of the locations that is going to be necessary is right in that area on the east side of East Street where the convenience center is. And we know that that's going to be a location of one of the detention basins. As a quick aside, as we build these detention basins to address stormwater runoff, we're going to try to turn those, see if we can't seize opportunities with the remodeling and renovation of the library, with the fact that it's right along the Constitution Trail. If we can't also turn this into some sort of amenity that can be used by the community. But I know that that one's probably caught some people's attention. So I wanted to go back real quick and just share sort of the rest of the story, how we got there. Even though it's a relatively small item, it's probably going to catch some people's attention. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you. Can we get to slide 8? Yeah, there we go. Thank you. The enterprise funds, first off, water. A lot of the items here are going to be complementary to other bigger projects. A lot of times we'll have different components for a big project like a Fox Creek Road Bridge. This is the water main that goes alongside the bridge. So this is a component of that bigger project. Locust Colton CSO elimination phase 9 design. Locust Colton is a project that's been in front of everybody for many years. Phase 9 is needing to be designed. A little ways from construction yet, but you know, we're trying to keep that on an accelerated time frame. So this is a component of that Locust Colton phase 9 for design. We've got multi-year GIS consultant services. This is something that we've been doing every year for a number of years now to help leverage the GIS. We have a great GIS. We have a lot of good information, and we have some folks that work with it in-house, but it just helps us with the consultant services to keep our GIS kind of state of the art and be able to leverage it in the field and other places. So very important, even though it's a small number. Also with the multi-year consultant leak detection, this is something that we've been doing for a number of years as well. Specialized contractor with specialized equipment helps us to be able to listen underground to locate leaks that might not be coming to the surface. And obviously the sooner we can locate leaks and stop them, the less water loss we have, but also potentially the less for a bigger leak becoming a water main dig. So important component there as well. Meadowbrook subdivision. This is part of that larger project that Craig mentioned. This is primarily a water main replacement project. So you can see the 4.7 million is a significant amount, but ties in with the other pieces for the sidewalks and the streets and the drainage and everything else out there. Along with that, we have some money programmed in for construction administration observation for that water main replacement. The next components deal with up at our lakes, reservoir shoreline, stream erosion planning and construction. We try to budget a little bit every year to continue progress. We've made some great progress up around Lake Bloomington recently, and it's really helping to reduce sedimentation getting into the basin and also improve the water quality. The third item there with the watershed improvements grant matching, we leverage opportunities to get any type of grant funding we can from different sources. And this would be a city match component. We've been able to leverage these in the past, and this would be for a city match to a larger grant that would help us get more done with the watershed. Hamilton Zone pump station land acquisition for the system-wide potable water distribution improvements. This is to site a new pump station. We had a presentation about a year ago talking about the system-wide distribution improvements, which the last item is that as well. This is trying to find a spot where we could put a new pump station on the east side, and then to final design that and some other improvements. That's what that last item is at 3 million. This is tens of millions of dollars of water system improvements. That's why that design component is a pretty hefty amount, but very necessary to continue forward with what we outlined to the council before. Next slide, please. Sewer fund, another enterprise fund. We have components of it with the sewer assessment. That's primarily the CCTV continuing. We've done that for many, many years and continuing that to assess the condition of the sewers. And then the next line is rehabilitation. And that's primarily lining, but can be also other types of point repairs and so forth. A significant amount for trying to maintain our sewers in good condition by primarily lining. And then we've got with the Locust Colton Phase 9, you'll see just like in the water, this is the sewer component, and then down below is the storm water component for that design. And then we've got East Street Basin Phase 1 construction, 2 components there, one from sewer and one from stormwater fund. This is looking forward to delivering some of the pieces. This would be a multi-year project. This isn't the whole thing. There's pipes that have to be moved and separated, and then basin construction and other things. But this is moving towards construction for the first part there. And then that last line item is the construction of the Citizen Convenience Center. As Craig noted, the first part was for land to find a site, and then this is actually to move it to a new location. So that concludes the overview of the capital projects. So I'll turn it back to Scott.
Thank you, Kevin. Next slide, please. Before we turn it over to the council for questions, just wanted to highlight the remaining calendar for the budgetary cycle. So we do have another presentation next Monday. We'll be expanding what we went through last Monday. So citywide revenue and expenditure exhibits, general fund by department, classifications such as public safety, and then proposed budget in March. We'll expand to show the dollars, further view of budgetary dollars at work like we did tonight. But I wanted to highlight this presentation and the other presentations can be found on the city's website under the documents, finance, documents budget FY24 page, so the community can follow along or review these after the fact for reference. So next slide, please. And that concludes the presentation. So we'll turn it over to Mayor and Council for questions and comments.
Okay, council questions. Okay, so we'll go with, let's see, Councilman Award, Craybill, Bolin. Councilman Award, go ahead.
Sure, thanks. Thank you all for this very thorough and helpful presentation. I do have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. I guess for Mr. Kothi and Mr. Schonkweiler, both of you made reference to the detention basin and also the sewers. And I'm trying to get a sense of what impact there will be from the detention basin on the larger city. I noticed that a lot of the funds that are being proposed are specifically to have an impact on wards 1, 4, and 6. And following the flooding in 2021, there was a significant impact on Ward 7, some of the poorer parts of the ward, and some of the just significant impact. And I'm trying to get a sense of, is there nothing that we're doing for Ward 7? Where does Ward 7 fit in here? So if you could explain that in a way that I can carry back to residents from Ward 7, that would be really helpful.
I'll take that. So overall, the focus is within this watershed where the East Street Basin is. Primarily because was identified in a previous master plan. Well, also we knew that there was some significant flooding there as well. If you can't imagine within a watershed, water flows from the upper part to the downstream part and ultimately gets to the Sugar Creek as it outlets from the city. This will, in essence, detain that water and release it slower through time. The Ward 7 piece is more upstream of Sugar Creek. So if you think about, you've got almost two competing watersheds with a confluence into the Sugar Creek. So if we're able to detain water on the downstream of that and Ward 7 water comes in above it, that allows for basically Sugar Creek to not be inundated as much as it would be overall.
So when I'm looking at the amount of flooding that took place, say on West Monroe Street, are you saying that that's related to the flooding of Sugar Creek? Or that it would take the pressure off of West Monroe?
Ultimately, anything that we can do within a watershed to detain the water and release it at a slower rate helps the whole system in totality. It may not be a direct 1-for-1, but anything that we do, when we even do small detention basins through time for developments, we have seen through time, and Kevin can attest to this, it helps with reduced flooding in that watershed overall.
If I could add that West Monroe, is downstream from, it's where we're talking about with East Street Basin, that the sewer actually continues on down through West Monroe. So if we can hold that water back, it will help with West Monroe as well. Now there's other things, and Craig didn't mention, but at some point we'll have with the hydraulic modeling a presentation coming back to you to share, that analysis and stuff in more detail. But since West Monroe is downstream from this area, anything we can do even with this upstream piece will help. And as he noted, it's all, combined into one. Eventually Sugar Creek is where everything heads. But if any of the systems start backing up, right, then, potentially there's flooding. And in some cases, we saw with that June 2021 storm, both, surface flooding and other flooding that was occurring because of, combined sewer backups and so forth. So just a lot of water to, take care of. And if we can safely hold that in detention basins, like we've seen, with the newer areas of the city, for instance, east of Veterans Parkway and stuff, we saw significant impacts where, Sugar Creek didn't even come out of its banks a good portion of the city because of all that. That was been provided over decades on the east side. So, this is just first step, if you will, right, to helping that overall system.
Yeah, and I would add too that, we have the study for the basin. We've also done a companion hydraulic modeling piece for more downstream. We do envision another piece of the puzzle later where we would look at primarily that other watershed where 7 is and even to the east.
Yeah, I would really, I'm very eager to hear about that. And I forgive my skepticism only because I see wards 1, wards 4, ward 6. Not a word about ward 7. And so I hear you saying, yes, it'll also have an impact, but you're not saying that ahead of time, which leads me to see it as hopeful rather than an actual plan with regard to that. So I'm really eager on behalf of folks who really suffered in 2021 and are continuing to deal with the fallout of that. And not just West Monroe, that was a significant part. The area just to the south of Holden Homes by the NICOR plant is another area, numerous other streets. So that's what I had to say about that. I want to say, Mr. Waller, thank you with the solar evaluation and the EV evaluation. I'm very supportive of all that we can do with regard to that. Mr. Schonkweiler, could you just give us an update on what's the timeline in terms of the Route 9 work beginning? I realize that that's not all in the city's control, but what are we looking at there?
So the DOT has programmed funds from FY24 through FY28. And that would be their fiscal year, which starts July 1. So July 1, that would be the for when the money is available for them to start from Martin Luther King over to Henshaw.
This coming summer.
Potentially, yes. Now,
Awesome.
keep in mind, it's much like our fiscal year, right? You can still, it might be
Yeah.
in the spring a year from now,
Mhm.
but that's when they have it in their program.
That's great. And then just one last comment. I really am very skeptical of the need for a monument sign at I-55 and I-74. I think that the further landscaping with regard to the monument signs, I feel like that is money that would that $100,000, that's what we're talking about, $75,000 for another monument sign and $25,000 for more landscaping. I feel like the people of my ward are very skeptical of more signs and would much rather have that money spent on something like playground equipment in the northern part of White Oak Park, for example, or anywhere else, any number of other ideas. And so I just can't support $100,000 more for signs and landscaping of signs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Crable. And bear in mind, the time is back there, so if we get close to it and need more time.
I'll be super quick. I want to thank you all for the presentation. I like having the directors here to explain things, but Molly asked all my questions, so that's it.
Oh, well, thank you. That was super quick. Okay. Councilmember Bowling, can you top that?
No, no, I can't. I have a few questions and a comment also. With that lining, what's the life expectancy after you put it in?
Lining, we've had sewers lined for decades already, but it's basically a new pipe inside a pipe. So, you could typically say, somewhere 75 years plus, but
Okay.
honestly, I haven't seen a liner fail yet. So
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's a pretty good,
it is, it's
Fixed.
basically a new pipe inside a
Long
pipe,
term.
if you will.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not questioning the amount. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure that it lasts long enough.
It lasts a long time.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's see. Oh, on that Route 9 corridor improvements, who ends up doing the maintenance after it's improved?
Yeah, well, with the state improvements, the state still does maintenance with that. There are some caveats that sometimes, with city-state agreements and so forth, that the city sometimes has some maintenance of some of the items, like for instance, a median or something like that, or
Okay.
curbs and stuff like that. Plus, depending on where it's at within the state route, Like, I think most of you are aware that we have an agreement, an IDOT city agreement, that the city will plow and pothole patch certain sections of Route 9 and 150 and so forth. So when you get, like, for instance, Route 9 east of Veterans, we don't do Veterans Parkway, but we do most of the core of the city with plowing and pothole filling and stuff. But that the IDOT actually pays us annually a certain amount to do that for them. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. And I've already shared this in a 3-on-1. I'm gonna pull a award 2 shout out for the Fox Creek Bridge. Just last week, there was an auto collision right there. I don't know if it was weather related. I do know that that bridge gets a little slick when the weather is bad. It's been in the capital project column for many years, as long as I've been on council, and probably a decade before. I've lived out there for 12 years and it's been the same. And I really would like you to be more assertive with the land acquisition. I know that that's a complicated situation. And I said 12 months, but I would like to push it even shorter. And partly because there's a flurry of home construction, including apartment buildings. And you had shared that the volume is 5,000 per day, and it's just going to increase. It's the only access to the den. I mean, you know all this. This is going out for the public. It's not, it's the only access to the den. We're talking about expanding the trail, Constitution Trail out to Funk's Grove and all that. It's the only access. There's no sidewalk. Pedestrians, cyclists, they're in big trouble going over that bridge. So it's a safety issue. If there's going to be a car accident, I've seen very close calls with pedestrians trying to cross that bridge. There's no other way to get to Casey's unless you drive. And kids that live in the Danbury Court area, they want to go down and get a soda, they cross that bridge. And it's really dangerous because there's a curve entering the bridge from Veterans and you don't have visibility. So I really want to get it done ASAP. And for the record too, for the community, part of the reason our budget is big or bigger is we keep rolling over this, $20 million project. So I'd like to get it checked off the list. Thanks.
Yes. Casey's, home of the breakfast pizza.
It's good.
It is good. It is really good. Okay, Councilmember Emick.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I just want to point out the amount of investment in infrastructure that's evident in this plan. And I think it's responsive to what you've been hearing from all of us here and what we certainly have been hearing from our constituents. So I appreciate that. Back to Councilmember Ward's question about the response to the June flooding we had in 2021. And as you know, we voted to accelerate the Locust Colton project. Even within Ward 4, I get questions, why are you starting here in Ward 4 and not in my part of Ward 4? Because the damage was consistent throughout the community. And my understanding of it, and this is also to communicate back to the public, that a lot of the work that's being done in the separation of these combined sewers and the hydraulic modeling and subsequent construction of the basins is based on that water plan, the assessment that was done. And it has to do a lot with elevation, that you chose to start where you did, not because of sort of who lives maybe in a certain neighborhood, but rather that it made the most sense engineering wise to start in certain aspects of the community to go through this extensive comprehensive separation of the sewers, as well as detaining water in these key areas so that the whole system, including our neighbors and friends in Ward 7, would not, so it's more practical than hopeful, I guess is what I'm hoping you might convey. Although I know that you don't like to make promises, but this is what I communicate to residents in Ward 4 who don't understand why you haven't torn up their streets yet. Even though when you do, they'll have some issues with that as well. So any more information on that would be useful.
We, as was indicated, we are nearing the final stages of determining the different pieces of this plan. And we will be coming to a committee of the whole in the coming months to do a presentation with our consultant Baxter and Woodman to outline the plan, show the positive benefits of what is being planned. They have a very powerful piece of software that they use that's really interesting, that can actually show the flooding reduction. They can take the houses that have been impacted. They can show the post situation where it limits the odds basically of the flooding occurring there. That will be coming in the coming months. So that'll tell the story more of where we're headed or where we're suggesting to head. And then likewise, as Mr. Gleason indicated, there would be amenity components here with the basin for under consideration to turn this really largely from a industrial looking area to more of a park-like area that's adjacent to the library and downtown.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of the elements of green infrastructure that were shared with us, the you are committed to doing and have done are part of this larger plan too to mitigate flooding.
Right.
But I will be watching closely too, because I'm curious how this will continue to progress and hope, more than hope, but seems to be we're on the right course, but I do appreciate the concern. 2 more comments. I appreciate the touch that Fall Park is getting. And I think it's great that you can go after grant funding for playground equipment and resources, but it is constantly in use. So that's wonderful that we're upgrading our parks, and that one is very close to my home. So I do appreciate that, and my neighbors do as well. And finally, a comment that I made, but is a much larger response, has to do with how we can be more intentional with infrastructure going forward so that we can slow drivers down since we have such a high accident rate. And so much of that has been shown to be related to the engineering of streets, and people you can't help but go faster. I mean, you can, but it's harder not to. And just continuing to think about ways to incorporate ways to help people drive more slowly would be a really important step. And I know that the planning commission, not the regional planning commission, did some work on this and had a pretty nice presentation about how we might be able to enact some of that. So thank you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're down to 4 seconds, so. All right. Right on time. Thank you all very much for a great presentation, and we're looking forward to next steps. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda, while the chief gets up here, is a presentation and discussion on violence prevention measures as requested by the police department and the administration department. And I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Gleason for some introductory comments.
Very brief. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This was a conversation that we had a couple of months ago. Maybe it has not been that long. Chief Symington is going to walk through that previous presentation very briefly, but allow council to have a follow-up conversation on this topic. Real quickly, I will also add that what brought us to the table, if you will, a couple of months ago was a $500,000 DCO grant. And that's a state agency, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And it was something that was a part of the current state budget. And we have an excellent grant administrator that we work with on the public works side, the park side, the police side. And they have suggested that we find current uses for things that we've already spent the money on to in order to wrap up this grant opportunity before the close of the state's fiscal year. That's exactly what we've done. It does not change the fact that we still have $500,000, and the recommendation of staff is to proceed with exactly what the community and council heard a couple of months ago. So this is that follow-up conversation. Chief.
Good evening. Thank you, City Manager. Thanks to the elected officials and Mayor for this opportunity. Next slide, please. Certainly the police department knows that we have an obligation to advance in many ways, improve efficiencies, be more responsive in ways to reduce violence in this community. We have an obligation to work with the community and other stakeholders to ensure that we carry that out in the most appropriate fashion. And this $500,000 grant will certainly allow us to do that. Our strategy is to expand our abilities to deliver more comprehensive service to the city of Bloomington and its residents, being intentional and focused to deploy preventive efforts while also identifying those who carry out violence more swiftly, providing justice for families who hurt on a daily basis. Prevention is not one-dimensional, nor is it accomplished by this effort alone, but it is a step towards the appropriate direction. So we will demonstrate our ability to enhance engagement, whether that's the summer painting with the youth at the mural as one piece, and a variety of others. We've had over 200 documented opportunities to engage with the community. We know that's important. Also, what we've proposed spending the money on has a direct tie-in to the pillars of the president's administration, and certainly stemming the flow of firearms and dealing with gun crimes in communities is important. Having a law enforcement tool of community policing and tracking and using the data associated with gun violence to stop it, community violence intervention, as well as expanding summer programs for the youth. Those are for the 5 pillars that the President Biden's administration has put forth for law enforcement. And of course, those have direct ties into our current strategic plan, reducing crime and the fear of crime, improving the quality of life in our neighborhoods, and then using technology to advance our capabilities. Next, please. So I will talk about the various proposals. The Youth Summer Program is one that we've actually built some momentum. The program is being built as I speak tonight, and we're making some progress. We will identify 36 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to participate in a program. We expect, my expectation that be a diverse group of students from a diverse background throughout the community, but also leveraging the school to help us in that process. We've set a date for July 10th through the 14th for that camp. And so far it's been very promising, and there's been tons of interest from our stakeholders and others who will help us with that program. Next, please. TIP 411 program. We have launched the first episode or the first iteration of that, and the feedback has been very positive. We are receiving tips now concerning crimes that have occurred in the city of Bloomington. And as that continues to build momentum, as we continue to educate the public on that opportunity to anonymously report crimes to us without any fear of retaliation or retribution. That tool will continue to be beneficial for the police department and our community. Next, please. Reward money for providing tips to the police department. Again, we have a community or witnesses, I should say, that we've been able to identify in various crimes, and they refuse to cooperate. They do not want their names associated as being witnesses in crimes. This provides an opportunity for us to use money to incentivize that opportunity and hopefully give them an avenue to report without having to worry about conflict from various people that are involved in violence, the retaliatory concepts or worries. We all know that there's a very small percentage, and usually it's about the 1 or 2% range of people who are responsible for the violence in a given community. And the more we're able to target those folks and hold them responsible and have higher levels of accountability, the safer this community will be. NIBIN, the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, is a proven tool. It's working in numerous communities throughout the United States. It is one that was developed by the ATF. If you could show the next slide as a demonstration for what occurs in these gun crimes. This is an illustration of 2 guns seized by a police officer on a stop. That gun is then taken to the police department. If we had this tool, we would fire a couple test rounds. Those rounds would be dumped into the NIBIN system. Almost within that next business day, if the system works efficiently and as promised, it will connect that gun to any other unsolved crimes throughout a community, not only here in Bloomington, but throughout the United States. And so we've had guns that we've been able to find here that have been related to other crimes throughout the United States. But this tool will allow us to get that information quicker, sooner, and be able to hold those that are involved in gun crimes responsible in a faster way. Next, please. We have a 2-pronged proactive gun availability reduction effort that the team came up with. And one part of that is a gun buyback program. We know when families lose loved ones, for instance, some are wondering, what do I do with guns that have been left behind? There are others who just feel that they do no longer want a gun in their household. This will provide an opportunity to get those guns off of the street and therefore reducing the availability of them throughout a community. It's been effective in various jurisdictions, and this will be the first time that we would try this program locally. Another proactive strategy is the purchase of gun safes through either a vouchering system or purchasing safes to provide them to Bloomington residents who have guns and would need a way to secure them. 20% of the guns we seized last year were stolen, and they were stolen in residential or car burglaries. We broke a record last year, seizing 88 illegally possessed guns. And that's very concerning. But again, the more opportunity we provide for the residents to secure their weapons through education, through providing this tool, will allow us to drive that statistic downward. Next, please. And the last 2 items are public safety cameras. The city of Bloomington enjoys a very progressive public safety camera system, and it is one that's recognized nationally. We were just invited to a conference to speak on how we utilize the cameras here in the city of Bloomington to provide that to other law enforcement agencies. Many Central Illinois cities call for best practices that we have here in the city of Bloomington to help them build and expand their public safety cameras as well. So you should be very proud of that. So we're offering to purchase 2 additional public safety cameras. We have 2 currently that we use, and that's not enough. For instance, when 23,000 people came to the Tailgate and Tall Boys event last year, we did not have enough camera footprint to cover the entirety of what we call the critical areas of concern for public safety. So that's just one example of how we can further utilize that as the city continues to have public events, whether it's downtown or throughout the city. We want, the police department wants to ensure we provide a safer environment for them. And many people comment positively on seeing those cameras. It makes them feel safer. It provides assurance that, you know, the police and areas of protection are available here, which is delightful for their experience. And then the other item is the unmanned aerial vehicles, which would provide video and photography opportunities for the police department within the parameters of the state law. That will be first and foremost, and then also having a accountability dashboard so the public can see how often we are using such tool. And transparency is imperative, and we certainly understand that. And the last slide, please. So we've commenced the application process with the state of Illinois. As City Manager Gleason has spoken to, they're very responsive, and we hope that we will have continual conversations so that we do not miss the opportunity to leverage this grant. And then that would certainly free up $1.5 million that we're currently budgeted to make this program come to fruition. I'll take any questions.
Councilman Award.
Thank you, Chief, for that presentation and for reminding us of the proposals that you presented at the previous time you were here. It's great, especially to know that the time pressure is off now, that we've gone ahead with the DCEO grant application to cover other expenses. And so that takes a little bit of the pressure off in terms of having to kind of rush to figure out how we're gonna spend the $500,000. And I'm really glad that we're having this opportunity to be able to talk through this in a thoughtful manner. I appreciate many of the ideas that you've come forward with, in particular, the gun buyback program and the gun safe program. Those are particularly meaningful. A few years ago, my dad died, and he owned at least one firearm, and it would have been nice at that time. He wasn't here when we cleared out his house. His house was out of state, but it would have been nice to know that that kind of thing was available where he lived. And so I could imagine that being a really, really useful process for people to be able to tap into locally. I also am supportive of the reward money for tips. I did have one question. It sounded like from one of the slides that you were referring to something that's already underway. Is that the case with the 411 tips, or did I just misunderstand that?
No, ma'am, you are correct. We're currently in the first quarter of an agreement with that company, and would love to have the opportunity to expand that to multiple years. But yes, we have initiated and paid for 1 year.
Okay, that's helpful to know. So most of these I think are great ideas. Two items I really would like to, or one item I would like to propose in replacement of one of the items, and that is, I would like to propose that we engage as a city in some training with regard to restorative practices. I've made reference to this before, and I wanted to actually share just an overview of what restorative practices is for people who might not be aware of this. This is from the International Institute for Restorative Practices. And I would just preface it by saying that there has been restorative practice training on a smaller scale in the community in past years. Probably about 5-6 years ago, I actually attended a training along with some members of the community, and including people within the criminal justice system and so forth. But as an overview, restorative practices is a social science that studies how to build social capital and achieve social discipline through participatory learning and decision-making. There's a difference between restorative practices and restorative justice. Restorative justice is a subset of restorative practices. Restorative practices includes the use of informal and formal processes that precede wrongdoing, those that proactively build relationships and a sense of community to prevent conflict and wrongdoing. Where social capital, that is a network of relationships, is already well established, it's easier to respond effectively to wrongdoing and restore social order, as well as to create a healthy and positive organizational environment. Social capital is defined as the connections among individuals and the trust, mutual understanding, shared values, and behaviors that bind us together and make cooperative action possible. So it precedes social or restorative justice practices, which are more reactive after the fact. So why am I saying all this? Because there are shovel-ready training programs for our community available that could happen as soon as this summer that I would propose would be a better use of some of the money that's being proposed for the summer camp. I don't have a problem with summer camps. I think those are a great idea. But I think that first it would be useful to train more community leaders in restorative practices and then move forward with the summer camps and other programming once we've got the leadership who are trained. And so I'm proposing that we table the idea of the summer camps for a time and instead put that money to use on some training, a summer camp, if you will, for leaders in our community, including in the police department and other community leaders in restorative practices. So that's one item. I'm a little skeptical of the need for the drones, given that the town of Normal also is seeking to have some drones. I don't have as strong feelings about that as I do about the restorative practices, but I would simply lift up, you've talked about cooperation in other terms, especially around the ballistics and ways that we're a leader in cooperating and sharing our technology around surveillance cameras and so forth. Can we also maybe draw on the cooperation of others to use that money and not duplicate the efforts? That's all I have.
Thank you. So Councilmember Walsh and then Cribble and Bolin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really encouraged by what I see here and all that. And I do have a question about the camps. I saw the number of 36 young people that would be targeted for this with a $40,000 price tag for that 1 week camp. And, so that equates to just over $1,000 a young person. That's a pretty expensive 1 week camp. And so I guess my question is, who are the young people that we're targeting here for participation in this camp? Obviously no names type of thing, but what what types of backgrounds? Why would these kids be our population that we would want to encourage to attend this camp?
Great questions, sir, and I appreciate your comments. This is the first iteration of what we see from a visionary perspective is being able to touch even more kids year 2, year 3, and expanding into the high school age group. And the things that have been put in place for selecting the students are in cooperation with the school district. Our school resource officers are taking the lead. They're very excited to do this. The summer is their off time. They're not in school, of course, serving kids. So they thought this would be an opportunity to serve kids further. And when setting the parameters, we want it to be a diverse opportunity. We are looking for kids who are in need of mentorship, who are in need of engaging in the summertime when, of course, they may not have much else to do. We're also looking at this perhaps as an opportunity to further expose kids to the field of law enforcement for long-term investments into attracting, interested parties to serve as police officers in the future. So a recruitment effort. We are deferring this first iteration, the opportunity for that selection group from teachers. And, the school resource officers know the kids very well. And so they'll have some input as well. And there will be an application process. We have to get waivers from parents and encouraging their participation as well, because we want to tap into that engagement opportunity with them, as well. And so we haven't fully developed those requirements yet, but they're in process now. And we hope to have something final to be able to send those applications out by April is the anticipated date. So we can identify the children before May 1st.
Okay, thank
So I
you.
hope I've addressed your question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Cribble.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief Symington, for that presentation. I like many of the proposals. One of the best, I think, are the gun buyback and the gun safes. I know you and your department have been working with Be Smart, the organization, because there's good and bad ways, I think, right, that you can use those programs. And so it sounds like you're, like other things, trying to use best practices for that. And I noted, I think, in your statement that, public safety, I think, is not one-dimensional. So, public safety is broader than policing. Violence prevention is broader than policing. And so, I'm in agreement with Councilmember Ward on looking at a restorative type of program, and wanted to see, what your experience is with that and what your opinion is of that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I've had the opportunity to spend time with Mr. Kevin Jones, who is a local trainer. Some of you may know him. And so we've had some conversations. Our SROs, school resource officers, have received a training. There are some other folks on our staff who have received some of the training. And there's a place for it. It's a very progressive, comprehensive way of getting to the table for people to come together and bring ideas and talk through it and have an opportunity to listen. And we understand that's important. And so restorative practices are proven programs, if the participants are engaged. And it's my understanding that they are training throughout this community, Bloomington, Normal, and the county on an ongoing basis. But I can't attest to how much training has occurred within the community, but certainly we've been at the table. We've had some of those discussions.
And then also just reference something that Councilmember Montney said, I don't know, a few meetings ago about street lighting. Do you think that in some cases, more street lighting can help with preventing crime?
Mr. Crable, yes, there are studies that say that. There are other studies that have, concerns about the overuse of street lighting. It's a broader discussion, one that, you have to go through assessments for certain neighborhoods, certain businesses, to ensure that they have the appropriate lighting standards to fit that environment. But it does have a place in crime prevention.
Yeah, I'd like for us to do some kind of assessment, the city to do some kind of assessment on that, whether it's through the proposals for the $500,000 at some other time. Going back to restorative justice, I think part of it is supported by the pillars. Renew problem-oriented policing approaches, engage community members and community groups from neighborhoods disproportionately affected by crime by forming problem-solving partnerships. And then even the engagement unit, right? One of its goals is to strengthen bonds, build trust between the police department, the community. The trust created and maintained will allow for collaborative problem solving, crime prevention, and safer neighborhoods. So I think restorative justice is supported by the pillars and the goals of the police department. I also, in looking at ways that maybe we could spend money on restorative justice, what could we potentially cut and use later? I think there's 2 tip programs in this, and maybe we see how the tip works, right? It's starting to work well. And witnesses, if they're paid money, I'm not sure if that is the right incentive if they're worried about their safety, right? And then on drones, since they have a limited use right now, I know there's a bill, right, to expand its use. Why not, the cameras that we already have and that are part of this program, use those for events, things like that, until drones can be better used. And so I will leave it with that. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Councilmember Bullen.
Yeah, actually, I like your suggestions and recommendations for the use of the money. I do know that the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council has, the majority of the participants are from nonprofits, and many of the programs and initiatives that are being proposed and actually working on have to do with developing relationships, mentoring, not just primarily for behavioral issues, which is what leads you to criminal activity. And then I also know that I just got an email today, actually, there are grants available for, the email was from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And there's several grants coming forward that are based towards youth. And probably after they got in trouble, but I know that the goal of that coordinating council is to keep the kids out of the system. They might go to the court, but they are processed in a sense that we are going to help you. So I think that framework is already available in the community, and the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council is basically paid for from local sales tax. I don't know about the criminal justice, but we do pay property tax. Bloomington is the county seat, so anything that happens here, I'm proud of all the work that's done in this community for addressing youth. We have so many wonderful organizations that do spend time with youth, try to prevent people from getting into trouble. And if they do, to try to help them steer in the right direction. And I want to celebrate that rather than criticize it. I think there's always room for improvement. And I'm curious what the shovel-ready programs are that we can jump into that are not already in place.
Okay, before you answer, we have, I see the clock there at 0. So is there a motion to extend by how many minutes?
I'll make a motion to extend 5 minutes. I
5 minutes.
doubt it'll be that long.
Okay. I really like you. Is there a second? Okay, second. So motion by Councilmember Emig, second by Councilmember Walsh, and just a voice vote, right?
I actually just updated the electronic voting.
Oh, okay.
We can take yours over voice.
Okay, all right. So we have 5 minutes and Chief, you have the floor. Answer that question. I think it was a question.
That would be my question too. What, is there a question before?
Yeah, Alderman Ward mentioned shovel-ready projects in the city.
Okay, so I'm certainly aware of the grant opportunities that you mentioned. I received the same email today. And that email went to a plethora of other community leaders and not-for-profit organizations in the community. And so my team will be looking at that to see if there's anything that we can leverage. With the reorganization of the department, we added a grant, a lead grant person who will be hyper-focused on grant opportunities, whether that's traffic safety, public safety, violence reduction. And so we are doing our best to identify grant opportunities in the future and to leverage those, but also to bring other interested parties, stakeholders to the table so we can collaborate on some of those ideas to further the impact of what's already going on in this community. Many others wonder how our violence is so low. And I always give the kudos to the organizations that are in the community now and operating, whether it's the coordinating Justice Council, there's a variety from the Jewel Foundation. We just met with them last week to have discussions. The Boys and Girls Club, we've been very present there. We've been very present at the Western Avenue Community Center. Big Brothers and Sisters, YMCA, YWCA. So with all of those organizations that are out there, we want to be present. We are better engaging them with the community engagement unit. And we know that the sky is the limit, and we are making differences in collaboration with others.
Well, that's what I was talking about, that we should, well, that I like to recognize and celebrate that all these things exist. And you use the word collaborate, coordinate. That's one of my favorite words because you get more done that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll give a chance to people who haven't spoken yet. Councilmember Emig.
you.
And then we'll go to Councilmember Ward after.
And Councilmember Bolin kind of teed this up for me because I was going to comment on collaboration and coordination as well. I thought your response about the impact of restorative practices was right on, because I found a meta-analysis that dictated, especially for youth, it could be incredible, an incredible tool, especially if it's built into sustainable ongoing support, but there has to be engagement and investment. I'm wondering if there's a way to combine the summer camp initiative, especially if school resource officers are going to play leadership roles in that, with something that Kevin Jones as a certified trainer might offer, or to open it up to other community leaders and have these young people engage in the practices and then can go and be leaders in their school communities. I'm not sure, but there might be a way to do a bit of both. And I was reminded recently of Alderman Becker's comments about Dr. Frank Beck at the Stevenson Center. And I reached out to him recently and just sent him the SIU article about how violence prevention funds were being used in Carbondale. He was very intrigued with that and said, oh, let's have a conversation. There might be opportunities for future collaboration. And I'm hearing if other grants are coming forward, or there's an opportunity to apply for this kind of funding, then why not get everybody at the table about what we're already doing, what might or could be possibly enhanced or studied so that we implement something that really is needed and it's a collaborative effort. So I know that Dr. Beck provides data to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And he was intrigued by what's happening at SIU, and Dr. Beck's style was eager to have more conversations. So I think there's a lot of potential here, and working together makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Councilmember Ward and then Councilmember Monty.
Yeah, in
And
response.
we have 3 minutes.
We might need to extend, but in response to Alderman Boland's question about what shovel-ready programs were out there, I was assuming she was referring to me since I used that comment. And I would like to point out that one of them is a restorative practices training that would be, let's see, 5-10 days long, and could be for up to about 20 community leaders who would then be able to use that training to continue on and provide more training for other people and use those skills rather than just a one-off kind of thing. But those folks would then be able to use those skills in a broader sense in the community. And that would involve an overview of the restorative practices framework, numerous restorative practices, restorative policing and community partnership, and restorative leadership. And that is, like, as I said, something that would be ready to go. I can forward you proposals with regard to that by people who are certified trainers. So that's what I was referring to is in terms of shovel-ready projects, and I'd be happy to share that with you. Very happy to.
Thank you. Councilmember Monty.
Just an observation. A lot of the violent crime that I read about in the local media here is committed by people who don't live on our community. So just acknowledging that while there's, I'm sure, opportunity to continue the good work going on here in Bloomington, some of these other tactics that you're talking about are tactics that will help provide for the safety of our people, acknowledging that some of those perpetrators are not from here.
Thank you. Okay, well, no more need for any more time. So I think, from what I've heard, overall, generally people are in favor of what the chief has proposed, with some minor tweaks here or there. However, what I would say is that I do feel, I think people feel bound by the number 500,000. But I think there is certainly opportunity down the line if we want to add something else like this restorative practices training, depending on what the cost is, that there is opportunities for that because we are responsible for the budget. And we can certainly make additions as we, as we see necessary. So I just kind of wanted to sum that up for everyone. And personally, I would be in favor of, at some point, the chief bringing back, this proposal, particularly given that in some cases, like the summer program, which is a little broader than we understood initially in terms of your goals, there is it's coming up shortly, given the application period. I think it's April, you mentioned, right? That you want to have the application up by April.
Yes, Mayor, that's correct. We want to have the kids selected by May 1st.
Okay, sounds good. So that is what I see, and I think we're ready to move to the next step on the agenda, which is, thank you very much, Chief, for your presentation. This was very helpful. Okay. So we're going to move on to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor and
Mayor-
Council. Slides only this evening. March 1st, Friday is Shamrock and Roll downtown, not this Friday, but next. Next slide. Job fair. This one is March 7th. It's at the arena, 4:30 to 6:30. Hoping to see some media coverage on this. I know we'll be pushing this through our social media. A great place to work. Next slide. And Miller Park Zoo, junior zookeepers. Actually, you saw some of this in the mayor's State of the City. It's a great program, and it's going to be held March 6th, 7th, and 9th. And then the Miller Park Stampede is a 5K run, 3K walk, quarter-mile fun run on March 4th. Next slide. Here we go. Welcome to the city. This is a slide that recognizes the new hires to the city. We have two new entry-level police officers, Tabitha and Kyle. We have Bill, that's with ECD, along with Nicole. Asa is with Arts and Entertainment, and Gaston is with Public Works. Promotion slide is next. And internal promotions. We started the first of the year recognizing these as well. Aaron was promoted to a heavy machine operator. Andrew to a marketing manager. Joni was promoted to a community enhancement inspector, and of note with Joni, longtime support staff with the city, and worked with the city inspectors, and actually went through, did the pathway for certification, and she stepped up into that new role, very critical need for the city. And Julia is with the zoo education manager, and that's a recent promotion as well. And I think that's it. All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, we do not have an executive session, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Bolden, who was second, not all at once. Councilmember Becker, all those in favor signify by saying